Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, Katan, we're going to talk about BRICS expanding their membership, taking in several other nations. We have COVID cases back on the rise, and also 2023 is now considered one of the hottest summers on record. And as we reported many times, scientists agree that man's activities have caused some dramatic changes to the Earth's climate, now especially in its weather patterns. Now, one major change is the higher than normal temperatures, which pretty much everyone has been experiencing this summer. 2023 is being recorded as the hottest summer ever across the globe. Now, our first video tonight gives us some understanding of how bad it is and why we should all be concerned. Please take a look.
We begin with news just into CNN. It's now official. This summer is the hottest on record globally by a huge margin. That's according to a report just released by Europe's Copernicus Climate Change Service.
It found that global average temperatures for June through August of this year were 0.66 degrees Celsius above average. In Fahrenheit, that's more than 1 degree warmer. This summer was the 5th warmest on record for Europe, and sea surface temperatures have been at record highs in the North Atlantic and globally.
And this record heat continues across parts of the US. More than 15 million Americans in Texas, the Midwest and the Northeast are under heat advisories today.
In the Northeast, the heat will peak later in the day, with some areas seeing some of the hottest temperatures they've had all summer. Parts of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore could hit 100 degrees for the first time in years. To discuss this, CNN's Katie Poglace is here. Katie, take us through the top lines of this new research and report.
Well, Bianca, it's clear that they are making some pretty drastic statements. They're saying this is globally passing any record. Now, these records have been set since 1940, so we're talking nearly 100 years. And they're saying that temperatures, not just air temperatures, but sea surface temperatures as well, have gone up and dramatically by a very wide margin, they say. And they're very clear as to why this is happening. This is not something that is accidental. They are saying it is man-made. The Deputy Director, Samantha Burgess, of the Copernicus Institute said that this is happening because we are emitting greenhouse gases, and the evidence is overwhelming, she says. And it's notable that this is happening. We've been talking about the typhoon in Asia, we've been talking about the Hurricane Idalia as well in the United States, and we've been talking about floods here in Greece, in Europe as well. This is no coincidence that these extreme weather events are happening while these temperatures are going up and up. And Greece really is a classic example of this. They had wildfires just a few weeks ago. They've just managed to get over these, and they're now dealing with floods. And these are the same areas where the wildfires hit. They are now having floods as well. And this is because the same influence, the same weather events that are happening are now impacting the floods as well. Areas that have been razed to the ground, trees that used to be there, are no longer there. So when the water is coming down, there is nothing to protect. There's no barrier to stop this water. And it's notable, one last thing on this sea surface temperature. You may think that isn't something that we are affected by. This is air temperature that makes us feel hot and feel cold. But the sea surface temperature is very important for the climate effects of these weather events. Because in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, for this Greece flood, for example, when the storm reaches it, that is when it will start heating up and will get more and more powerful. The warmer the sea surface temperature, the more it strengthens this weather event. In this case, this storm that they're fearing is going to turn into a medicane, which is effectively med, meaning Mediterranean Sea, and cane, meaning hurricane. It will have similar effects, similar consequences to a hurricane. So really, as we're seeing with Greece, as we've seen with the US as well, and we're seeing in parts of Asia, these weather events are going to continue. And certainly as far as Greece is concerned, the next 24 to 48 hours are looking incredibly devastating and really worrying for those in Greece at the moment.
The example of the sea surface temperatures rising and the impact that that has on these extreme weather events that you cite is but one instance of how we can see that increased extreme weather and increasing global temperatures is having a wider impact and worsening the climate crisis and making it more likely that global temperatures will continue to rise. Talk us through that cycle.
Absolutely. So we're seeing both extremes, really. We're seeing also, they mentioned in the Copernicus report, that there's been heavier rainfall in some areas of the world, and there have been drier climates in some areas of the world. So, for example, in Central Europe, there's been drier climates. In South America, there have been drier climates as well. That has led to wildfires. That is why we've seen the wildfires in Greece that I've mentioned. These cycles continue, and as the weather is heating up, as these temperatures are getting more and more extreme, the climate is getting more and more ravaged by this. And then the civilian toll, the impact that we're seeing, we've been covering so much extensively with Hurricane Idalia as well, is very clear to be seen. And the emergency services become more and more strained as well. Just one tiny example in Greece is this one village, Volos, a tiny city in Greece. It has been absolutely devastated by these floods. There have been reported fatalities already. And it also flooded the hospital. So the area that people are then seeking refuge in are then getting damaged as well. So the area that people are then seeking refuge in are then getting damaged as well. So as this cycle continues, the rescue services, the locations we go to then seek refuge and seek help from these weather events also gets damaged. So you can see that this has really catastrophic impacts globally as a result.
Yeah, I pretty much believe that you can speak to anybody in definitely the United States, definitely here in Texas, but pretty much anywhere on the earth, and everyone has been experiencing extremely hot weather this summer. Over 90 days, 100 days with temperatures over 100 degrees, at least in central Texas here.
Right, and as she mentioned that just the heating of the water, the surface temperature there, now experiencing these, adding to other weather phenomenons.
Right. Going to strengthen those hurricanes. Well, another problem that's been in the background this summer is once again coming to the forefront. COVID cases are on the rise, and hospitals across the U.S. are seeing a 20% increase in hospitalizations. Why now? Well, health officials attribute it to the combination of holiday travels, children heading back to school, and a highly contagious new variant.
Well, due to the increase, there has been a higher demand for COVID home test kits, and some stores are experiencing shortages. Now, Walgreens released this statement recently saying, "We are seeing greater demand, which may be the cause and may cause temporary and isolated shortages," unquote. Now, according to the LA County Public Health Department, the cases of COVID have gone up 116% over the last month. The nursing home communities have been hit the hardest.
Dr. Barbara Ferrer, the director for LA County's Department of Public Health, made this statement to show the seriousness of the situation. She said, quote, "There have only been a few times in the past year and a half when we saw this many new outbreaks in skilled nursing facilities, and these were during the previous summer and winter surges," end quote.
Well, but California isn't the only place COVID is ramping up. Now, on the East Coast, 1 in 4 nursing homes in New Jersey are now experiencing outbreaks. Dr. William Schaffer, an infectious disease physician at Vanderbilt Medical University, shared his insight with CBS Evening News about the recent developments. He says the increase in cases should make everyone cautious due to the fact that it has led to a noticeable increase in hospitalizations. Now, some hospitals have also started making masks mandatory for everyone upon entering. It's been a long time, Katan, since we saw that take place.
That's right. Well, Dr. Schaffer says, quote, "People who are older, who have underlying chronic medical conditions, who are immune compromised, and who are pregnant, well, we ought to get those masks out again and protect ourselves," he said. He also describes the virus as, quote, "sneaky," and recommends getting the next booster shot once it is offered to the public, because as time goes on, immunity wears off, even if someone who has had COVID already. Well, the CDC is promoting the new COVID booster as well, saying it will be available in a few weeks.
Well, one of the new variants is particularly being closely watched. Now, the CDC says less than 1% of the COVID cases are caused by the BA.2.86. However, it already has dozens of mutations that can cause it to be better at evading immunity from the current vaccines and previous infections. And of course, that's what they're so concerned about, is the immunity to vaccinations, and that these COVID variants can now just mutate and the vaccines are useless.
Right, and that was the problem from the very beginning when they were first working on vaccinations at the beginning of this pandemic. Was the concern was we don't even know if the vaccines are going to work, one, and then as the variants started to come out, they weren't concerned if the previous vaccination will cover the new variant. Well, when COVID was hitting the U.S. and the rest of the world hard, doctors and scientists alike were saying, don't expect to see COVID go away anytime soon. And while people are ready for the pandemic to be over, that didn't mean COVID had truly left when the mask mandates and travel bans were lifted. So now is it any surprise a new surge is surfacing at the end of summer? What does the future look like when it comes to living with COVID as an ever-mutating disease? Well, our next video talks about what's going on now with the virus and where it might be heading. Let's take a look.
Every summer, it seems like we think we're going to catch a break from COVID, and it never happens. And scientists are starting to wonder if maybe the summer COVID wave is going to be a thing into the future in 2024. Right now, there's two variants that we're going to talk about. One is Eris, which is the most common, and the other one is BA.2.86. The Eris variant is named after the Greek goddess of chaos, which is appropriate, and Eris was first discovered in China in February. That doesn't mean that the virus originated in China, but rather they were the first ones to pick it up. That doesn't mean that the virus originated in China, but rather they were the first ones to pick it up. In May, it was responsible for less than 1% of infections. In June, it was 5%, July 15%, and August, almost a quarter of infections, 24%. So basically, it's taking over, it's more infectious, and that's why a lot of people are getting COVID right now. Hospitalization rates have been going up. It's nothing like it was in 2020 or even 2021, but hospitalization rates and death rates have been going up just a little bit. Right now, the World Health Organization is calling Eris a variant of interest. Basically, what that means is that the WHO has noticed these variants are taking over, it's causing more infections, and more people are getting sick. Another variant that people and scientists in particular are starting to talk about is BA.2.86. And this variant seems to have a large number of mutations on the spike protein. Scientists think that it probably incubated somewhere in a person who was immunocompromised, so it had a long time to mutate and get a lot of weird mutations on it that we haven't seen before. So they're concerned about that because, while we don't know yet what it means, it could mean it's more contagious or it's more able to evade our defenses, that we've already built up the immunity we already have. It's hard to say how fast this variant is spreading. It's been sequenced in several different countries, which suggests that it is quite widespread, but there's only been 2 sequences completed in the US, and it's still pretty early days for figuring out what this virus is capable of.
Sounds like they're getting everybody used to the idea that COVID isn't going anywhere.
That's right.
Well, we're going to go back in time to 2011 for a moment to remember the Fukashima nuclear power plant disaster caused by an earthquake and tsunami. Now, 12 years later, the Japanese government is releasing nuclear wastewater from the plant into the Pacific Ocean. Now, many have opposed the plan to release the wastewater into the sea, including China, who has responded by banning all seafood imports from Japan.
That's right. Experts from Tokyo Electric Power Plant, or TEPCO, have collected so much radioactive water from rain and runoff since the Fukushima disaster in 2011 that the company had to add storage tanks to contain all of it. But now the tanks are nearly full to the brim with almost 1 million tons of radioactive wastewater, and they need to do something about it.
Of course, such actions have raised concerns that the ocean waters will be polluted with radioactive waste, but TEPCO says not to worry. They have used all their technology to remove all radioactive compounds from the water, with the exception of one called tritium. Well, tritium cannot be removed, so it is diluted to meet international standards. Now, according to their tests that they're running in the laboratories, TEPCO says the fish near Fukushima will not be effective, and will be safe to eat. And I think, Katan, some are probably going to question that.
Yeah, I would too. In fact, the International Atomic Energy Agency does back the release of the tritium water. However, the public are the real judge of who will eat the fish. Well, many lifelong Japanese fishermen believe the people will not eat the fish, which is, of course, it comes from their native waters. And so, of course, as the case with many of them, and that was their concern before, this is going to end their livelihood.
Sad. Well, what group of people are increasing in cancer? You might be surprised. Take a look at this next video.
For our next story, let's stay on health. Growing old has many upsides, but it also comes with a number of health concerns. A big downside is high risk of developing cancer. Increasingly, age is a key risk factor. It has been well documented. But now a new study, the largest of its kind, puts more weight on this grim trend. It says cancer in people under the age of 50 is becoming more common, and how? Cancer cases in the under 50s increased by about 80%, 80% increase, and this happened in the last 3 decades, the world over. More than 1 million people below the age of 50 are dying of cancer every year, and this could increase by another 21% by 2030. What's behind these distressing numbers? Our next report tells you.
The world is contending with a disease that's growing as rapidly and silently as a tumor, and now it's preying on the young. We're talking about cancer. As people grow older, the risk of developing cancer increases. Advanced age has been considered a significant risk factor. But now, research says even the young aren't safe, and people under 50 are increasingly becoming susceptible to the deadly disease. According to a new study, the number of under 50 people being diagnosed with cancer has risen by 79% in the past 3 decades the world over. Cancer occurring in adults between 18 to 49 years is known as early onset cancer. In 1990, global cases of early onset cancer stood at 1.82 million. In 2019, they increased to 3.26 million. It's important to note one thing here. There has been a 40% rise in the total population in the past 3 decades. But even so, a rise of about 80% is alarming. And that's not all. Not only the cases, but the deaths are increasing too. Over 1 million under 50 people are dying of cancer annually. That's a 27% increase in 3 decades. Where were the highest death tolls seen? They were linked to breast, windpipe, lung, stomach, and bowel cancers. But while the young across the world are being diagnosed, like most diseases, it's not equally spread. The highest incidence rates were in North America, Oceania, and Western Europe. This study is the largest of its kind, but it isn't the first to show this trend. Cancer records from 44 countries agree with this. They found early onset cancer rising rapidly for 14 types of cancers. Windpipe and prostate cancers rose the fastest by about 2% for each. Breast cancer is the most common type among the under 50. There were 13.7 cases per 100,000 people in 2019, with an increase seen in many middle to high-income nations. The question is, what's behind this substantial rise in cases? Experts are still in the early stages of understanding the reasons. They say, much like in cancer cases in older people, genetic factors play a part here. Studies are still unraveling the full scope of the problem. But they do say that no one is completely safe.
Well, it's interesting, like they said in the article, that there was commonly older people who were seeing cancers. Now we're seeing it in 50 and under. But interestingly enough, the windpipe cancer is something that was on that list, and that was something you never really heard of before.
Right, new cancer is coming up right now.
That's right. Well, the annual BRICS summit is being held in Johanesburg with the Russian leader on video link from Moscow not being able to make it. While at the summit, the South African leader read off the countries included in its expansion, because if you remember, there were several that were actually requesting to become a part of BRICS, and they were considering that. Well, those countries being the Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, 6 nations in all to become full members of BRICS, with their membership starting with the 1st of January 2024.
Well, Michael Bersiocchi, a global affairs analyst, spoke with Al Jazeera News concerning the influence of adding new members to the BRICS organization. He said, quote, China was very keen on expanding BRICS and said that this will breed vitality into the bloc. Now, that according to the Chinese foreign minister. Now, representation from South America was expected, with the addition Iran being a result of a push from Russia. Now, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are thought to be added to increase cash flow. And although Indonesia and Mexico were expected to be added, they were not.
With the watering down of the other organizations like the G7 and G20, seeing a big announcement coming from the BRICS organization is a move to strengthen African countries while moving farther away from the U.S. dollar to, of course, level the playing field. He also said that the U.S. will have a hard time winning back the loyalty of some of these African countries. Now, even though we're seeing BRICS increase its membership, there's not enough in common for BRICS to be effective because the leaders' views differ greatly on topics like, for instance, climate change, which is a big topic for a lot of leaders, not only in BRICS, but throughout the world. So as we see, these nations are still trying to make their move away from the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar. Of course, the United States has really been trying to maintain its stronghold or its dominance on that. And, you know, a lot of other countries are saying, yeah, we don't want to be under that oppression, not being able to have, you know, strength in our currency. So they're looking for other options, and BRICS seems to be their way out.
Right, and January 2024 is not that far off, Katan, and once these other nations join, you know, you could have a snowball effect where even more nations join, and as we just mentioned, America is going to have a hard time trying to regain any loyalty, especially if their needs are being met in the BRICS community, so to speak.
And so a lot of the analysts are wondering how these moves are effectively going to affect the U.S. dollar and our buying power, as we might end up in the same position that many other countries have seen as their dollar has weakened.
All right, well, America is not going to like that.
No, it's not.
If you'd like to learn more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas, 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them at any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yeshuahawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, we'd like to remind you of two absolutely free programs on the market. The Yisrael Says program by going to yisraelsays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to askyisrael.com.
Well, stay with us and get your pencil and paper and your scriptures, because up next is another classic sermon by Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.